Now, you might be old enough to remember when it was commonly accepted that children need to be punished physically and perhaps even insulted on occasion. After an error, I remember this when I was a kid, it was pretty normal. After an error, a slap across the back of the head, coupled by stupid, was simply the medicine they were thought to need. Spare the rod, spoil the child meant that if your son flunked out of law school, that's probably because you didn't beat him up enough. You should have kicked his ass harder, kicked his ass more often. And that would have made him a better lawyer and a better citizen. That was the governing wisdom. Go back a little bit farther, back to the 19th century, and the governing wisdom, so-called wisdom, put that in quotation marks, was even more brutal. It was applied not only to women, not only to children, it was applied to women. Hitting one's wife was considered a man's prerogative. And you might also have been told that she needed it. Or that some woman was perhaps not the best of mothers or wives because her husband shirked this manly duty. That's the way they spoke. I suspect men spoke that way more often than women, but since they controlled the press, they controlled the official line, right? Such attitudes ran right into the 20th century, but they did start to dissipate. The attitudes were applied to most anyone in a weaker position, not just the woman or the child. A slave or a servant might be said to need a whooping, and workers or the down and out could also somehow be said to benefit from assorted types of degradation. It's what they need. That's the only way those people learn. Now, I don't want to conflate different struggles. Everybody has their own unique struggle. That's not my intention. But I wish to impress upon you that despite the differences, here's one constant. Aside from justifying these kinds of abuse by saying that so-and-so deserves it, there was a tack on. It would improve them. It would make them better somehow. Your wife, your child, your slave, whoever is on the wrong end of the power relation will benefit from the abuse. Attitudes such as these have governed most of our history, and since the Enlightenment, they have been questioned and challenged. But this wasn't done fairly, squarely across the board. Seems like it was done one group at a time. Unsurprisingly, the children of the most privileged were among the first to get off the hook. They were the first, perhaps, to go to a school that wasn't totally abusive. There might have been a strap, but not like the crazy abuse that schools had traditionally laid on people, and not like the horrible abuse that was still being applied to less advantaged children. They were one of the first to get off the hook with respect to this mindset. Over time, different attitudes have been applied to other groups, ranging from homosexuals to visible minorities, the mentally ill, the mentally challenged. One by one, society starts to understand that you're not going to make these people better by hitting them, kicking them, spitting on them, shitting on them. No, you don't improve people that way. We're starting to get it. Now, today, if somebody is abusing Native people, and a lot of that still happens, at least that person will have to deny it. He or she will say, no, I'm not. 50 years ago, 80 years ago, if you were to accuse somebody of abusing Native people, he might have said, yeah, what's your point? Okay? There's the change. Right here, right now, the drug addict might be the last acceptable target for such talk. We are told that addicts need to hit bottom in order to get better. And this bottom might indeed entail beatings, rape, and other degrading experiences. And I'm sorry, but beatings and sexual assault are not good motivators. They don't turn people into better citizens. Here, I simply wish to draw your attention to how, right here and right now, drug addicts are thought to require what in the not too distant past many others were said to require. Western civilization has been moving away from this nonsense one group at a time. Now, finally, the drug addict is due. Anyone having trouble shaking the idea that a bottom is what an addict needs to get better should consider the power of cultural indoctrination and consider how 100 years ago he or she might have been just as sure that to spare the rod was to spoil the child. It's hard to get mainstream culture to step out of its prejudices. It takes a lot of work, but it can be done. You see, the emancipation of those with substance addictions is consistent with what our civilization has been accomplishing over the last 200 years. When politicians and other public figures oppose this cause, my knowledge of history, and I am, among other things, an historian of addiction, my knowledge of other things helps to assuage my anger. I understand that soon, probably in our lifetime, don't worry, it happens to all of us. The overcoming of these harsh attitudes toward the drug addict will be viewed in much the same light as today we view the abolition of harsh punishments for children, the introduction of women's suffrage, or the abolition of slavery. And again, I don't mean to conflate different struggles. But what each advance shares is an overcoming of cruelty and an overcoming of stupidity. I call that enlightenment. While setbacks will occur, the writing is on the wall. Canada's Supreme Court thwarted the Conservative government's attempt to do away with Insight, the medically supervised injection clinic for addicts. The Conservatives hold a majority in Parliament, but on this issue they couldn't win. The unanimous 9-0 ruling makes way for similar clinics across the country. It will. It's going to happen. Look all over the planet. The war on drugs is on the way out. Portugal, Greece, recently all the Latin American countries finally had the guts to stand up to the States and say, this is bullshit. We don't want to do this anymore. So the emancipation of the drug addicted is on the horizon. Politicians and other critics who oppose this cause are on the wrong side of history. And history will judge them harshly. And I want to talk about the big picture.